Good afternoon. We've completed nearly 8 hours of our 12-hour-long investigative hearing on the flight Asiana 214 crash that occurred in San Francisco last July. This morning and this afternoon we heard from 3 panels, and those panels were focused on issues such as the 777 flight deck design concept, Asiana's training program, and the last panel that we heard from focused on automation and human-machine interface. Obviously, that's an issue of great interest to the NTSB as well as the entire aviation community. This evening, when we come back, we'll continue with our last 2 issue areas, survival factors and emergency response. And so we look forward to hearing from, in total, about 20 witnesses today. We are gathering a lot more factual information. The purpose of our activity here today, it's an investigative hearing, it's fact-gathering phase of our investigation. We are not going to be performing analysis, but we will continue to gather additional factual information even after the conclusion of the hearing. When that work is done, then we will move to analysis as we complete our final report on this investigation. I'm happy to take your questions. Matt.
Could you please characterize the extent within airline operations of confusion about cockpit automation based on what you heard today?
Sure. The question is to characterize the extent of automation confusion in the cockpit based on what I heard today. I am certainly not an expert in this area. This is the reason why we had a hearing. We had a number of individuals, Dr. Kathy Abbott and Dr. Nadine Sarter, in addition to pilots as well as aircraft designers who were on a panel that we heard from that talked about this issue. I think what's clear from the studies, the data, the CAST work that's been done, the recent information that's been released on that, is that we do have an issue in aviation that needs to be dealt with respect to automation and performance when it comes to the interaction between the aircraft and the human being. We can always do better. And when we have accidents, we have to learn from them. And that's what this event gives us the opportunity to do, to learn from a specific event, but also to talk to experts who have a broad understanding across the industry about what can be done better. This industry has a great safety record. It's been 4 years since our last commercial aviation fatality in the United States. That's something to be very proud of, but we can't rest on our laurels. We have to move forward, we have to make progress, and we have to strive every day to do better. There's a lot of people involved in the chain when it comes to aviation. The NTSB is involved in the investigation portion. That's what we're focusing on. But again, this is an opportunity for the entire aviation community to hear about these issues, and no matter what they do, they can take this information and begin to make changes. Yes, ma'am.
Can you discuss the role over-reliance on technology and cultural issues both in training and in the cockpit will play in your final report?
The question is, can I describe the role of automation and
cultural issues both
cultural
in training and in the cockpit?
And cultural issues and how those will apply to our final report. I just responded to a question that had to do with automation and what we're doing as far as looking at automation. There is a question, the second part of the question relates to cultural issues. Certainly in any cockpit, in any country in the world, there are cultural issues, and in the NTSB, what our job is to be very fair and to base our information and our investigation and our findings and our recommendations on the facts. And so we will be looking at every issue. We will be looking at past accidents and investigations to see if there's anything that we need to know or pay attention to. But again, each event is individual, and we're looking at the circumstances of this accident to lead us to our conclusions. We have talked a lot about aviation, about automation. We have not talked a lot about culture and cultural issues today in this hearing.
Because we do have people who are saying experts and former pilots who are saying that this did play a role in the crash.
The follow-up question is that, that the reporter is hearing from others who are saying this played a role in the crash. A lot of other people will put forward information. I would ask you to reserve your judgment on what the cause of this accident is until the NTSB gathers all of the facts, performs our analysis, and reaches conclusions. Yes, ma'am.
Earlier this afternoon, Captain Lee mentioned that there was no general training in terms of the hold mode in flight level change. Can you discuss the significance of that?
The question is that Captain Lee described that there was no general training with respect to the hold mode. I would say that we want to be careful about how we characterize things. I think there was a lot of discussion about how pilots are trained. There's a lot of different resources that are available to pilots at Asiana. There are paper-based resources like the flight manual. There's computer-based training. There's ground school, and then there's time in the simulator. And so we're going to be evaluating all of that and determining what is the focus of their training and how extensive it is. Alan?
Do you have any plans to make recommendations out of this session, and if so, when would the time be?
The question is, does the NTSB have any plans to make recommendations coming out of this session, this investigative hearing, and what our timetable for that would be? I would say that the NTSB has no specific defined plans at this point to make recommendations coming out of this hearing, but the reality is we can make recommendations at any time in our investigation. So if we do identify a safety issue that needs to be addressed in advance of our final report, we will take the opportunity to do that. In the back?
You mentioned during the testimony the 3 red lights, and seemed to maybe perhaps challenge the witness a little bit about how long those lights were being observed. And also one of the other Asiana witnesses testified about the pilot maybe did not express reservations about doing a visual approach. I'm just wondering your impressions of the candor and forthcomingness from those witnesses.
The question is with respect to the testimony that's been provided today by the witnesses, and several different lines of questioning were referenced by the reporter. I have to tell you that everyone who is here today is here on their own free will. We did not have to demand that anybody appear today. We did not have to issue any subpoenas. Everyone who's here is here voluntarily. We believe they're being very forthcoming and providing information to us to the best of their abilities. Again, we have the opportunity to go back, clarify the record, ask additional questions, submit written questions for the record. And so if there are any areas where there's confusion, if it was unclear, we can clear those up. Another issue is we are having simultaneous translation, and in some cases sequential translation in 3 different languages. We all have to respect and be patient with regard to the information that's being provided back, and make sure that it is well understood and that the information that we are hearing is actually what was intended. And so we'll certainly be following up on that. Yes, Bart?
There's been a lot of testimony about the flying pilot and not as much about the instructor pilot. Could you say what role monitoring is playing in the investigation?
The question is, there's been a lot of discussion about the flying pilot, but not as much discussion about the monitoring pilot and what role that plays in the investigation. I will tell you, there are multiple crew members in the cockpit for a reason. No job is more or less important than the other. The flying pilot has responsibilities, so too does the monitoring pilot. Both of those pilots are expected to carry out their responsibilities professionally. That being said, we also had some training that was going on here, and so we had the pilot in command sitting in the right seat rather than the left seat, which is typical. We had an instructor in the right seat with a trainee in the left seat. We had 2 very high-time, very experienced pilots who were in that cockpit with specific duties. In addition, we had a 3rd pilot in the cockpit who was serving as a relief pilot, and he was sitting in the jump seat. So we want to understand the roles of each of those pilots, the communication that took place in the cockpit, and again, what can be learned from this event so that we can prevent future accidents. One more question.
The pilot flying said that he was stressed or concerned about having to perform a visual approach without the guidance of the ILS. How basic of a function is that, and what was your reaction to hearing that?
The question was, there were some questions related to the pilots and their level of stress with respect to coming in on a visual approach and flying without the availability of the ILS, the glide slope. And I think the question is asking me to perform some analysis, and I won't be doing that here. But we did also hear from their 777 chief pilot, who stated that they had no concerns about their flight crews coming into San Francisco and with respect to their capabilities when the glide slope was out. And so we've heard a lot of information today. It's really, we have to balance all of that information. We have to weigh it. And that's one of our major tasks ahead. We have gathered a lot of material. You've seen we opened a docket today with hundreds of pages of material. We've put out cockpit voice recorder transcripts and a number of factual reports ranging from human performance to aircraft performance. We now have to continue that work to close all of the factual information out, to perform a technical review with all of our parties. And then once that technical review is conducted and we have all of the factual information, we have a good basis for all of that, the work will come back inside to the NTSB. The parties are not involved in the analysis portion of the work that we do. The NTSB staff and the board members will be working to determine the findings, the probable cause, and any recommendations at the conclusion of our investigation. And so we still have a lot of work ahead of us, but we've gained a lot of information today, and we'll be back in just about a half an hour to get some more. Thank you all very much.